Okay, well, hello, Marcos. Thank you so much for being here on The Makeup Historian. Before we get started, would you mind telling us a little bit about your background and how you became involved in political
Yeah,
activism?
so I'm Marcos Zelada. I go to Cal State Fullerton, and before going to college and universities, I actually served in the United States Army as a military police officer. And my start in politics started kind of late. I wasn't really involved or too interested in politics when I was, in high school, where a lot of people get their start. And obviously, I started my educational career much later. I was like 22 when I actually started going to college after I left the military. And it really started kind of in a funny way and really organically. It was when Trump actually ran for office. My mom, who is a Guatemalan immigrant, called me to the living room and said, "Hey, you should listen to this guy. I feel like you'll like him." And I was confused by that because
Really?
politics wasn't really a talking topic in my home. We didn't necessarily talk about those things. We had a lot more pressing issues like how are we going to pay for rent and put food on our table. So I was genuinely surprised that she wanted me to listen to a political candidate announce that he's running for president. I was really surprised. I think the only time before that moment that I actually had spoken politics with my mom was when I had asked her, "Oh, are you going to vote for Obama?" Because it was the cool thing to do at the time. Where it was like, the first African American to run. I mean, regardless of his bad policies and terrible presidency and administration, it was genuinely a historical moment. And it was a thing that, it was a rave. It was something to talk about. It was exciting. And I remember asking her, and she quickly told me no. And that was about it. She said, absolutely not, and kind of moved on with my day. So it was, again, very surprising for me. And, we listened to him, and I was just like, yeah, I agree with just about everything he just said. I like him. I like his style. And from there, shortly thereafter, I mean, maybe a month or two at the most, I was gone and shipping to basic combat training, where, if you don't know, you're basically secluded from the world. You don't really read the news. You get a minute to call your family, so you don't really ask, hey, what's going on Fox and CNN. It's really a much different, short conversation. You don't really know what's happening in the world unless they tell you. And once I actually got out of basic and went to my first duty station, I started seeing what was happening in the headlines. By then, President Trump was already elected, so I had the blessing of serving under the Trump-Pence administration. He was the greatest commander-in-chief I could have ever asked for. I got very lucky. And I started reading more about what was happening. And of course, at that time, what really drew me to politics was the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. And before going into the Army, I was a young police explorer where all we did was just train to become police officers, and we did volunteer hours in our community. And it was really just about becoming a well-rounded person who had the ambitions of going into law enforcement and giving back to your community. And I knew these police officers as close friends and mentors of mine who really sculpted who I am. And the amount of hate that police officers were getting really drew my attention, and that's where my advocacy really began, was just against the hateful rhetoric of the left. But I just didn't realize that's what it was necessarily. And then I started reading more and more and headlines and doing my own research, where I kind of sculpted my own image of what I thought was right for America. And it just happened to align with what is actually right for America, which is the conservative political ideology and the Republican Party. And sure as heck, once I got out of the Army, I was at Mount San Antonio College, my alma mater, and I was going around debating any leftist I could find, any liberal table, anything that was, center left. So I was going around just trying to have a good time debating these kids, asking them simple things like, "Oh, you guys like socialism? That's awesome. Where has it worked?" And they're kind of silent, and I would say, "Yeah, it doesn't exactly. Why are you doing this?" And it was more of a genuine ambition to debate now that I was out of the military, with these other younger kids. I called them kids. I was only a few years older to them, but after the military, I felt ages older. And a genuine curiosity of what their thought process was, because I couldn't wrap my head around how they could think this is a good idea. And non-shockingly, I still don't understand. But I was speaking to them, and I was just doing the rounds at this, club fair. And I found a Turning Point table. And funny enough, at first, I thought they were also a left-leaning table, until I walked up and I saw taxation is theft, women for Second Amendment rights, things like that. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Who are you guys? And, the Lord blessed me.
Yeah.
They had their first meeting the very next day. And I got asked to be their vice president. Really shocking to me. And shortly thereafter, I believe like a
Wow.
semester or two, I got to be their president. And then COVID unfortunately hit. And then I went to Cal State Fullerton, and then I just continued being a president there. So that's how I got started. I got started with just these local nonprofit organizations that focus on teaching students conservative ideology and loving America. And then it kind of just came to fruition. And from there, now I'm the state secretary for the Republican National Hispanic Assembly. I've had the blessing with working with multiple candidates for public office that are true conservatives running as Republicans in California, which has been a tremendous learning experience and a really good time. And it all started from there. Just BLM being as hateful as we already know they are, to doing my own research, figuring out, hey, I'm conservative. Look at that. And really my family in those early days of learning to have selfless service, which is an Army value, and giving back to my community as a police explorer, and having love for my fellow Americans, and knowing that being in this country is a blessing. And it just organically lined up to me being a conservative and getting so involved with the party and doing whatever I can for conservative values to come out on top in California and in America.
Yeah. I love all of that because I think, especially millennials and Gen Z, I think they desperately need to get involved in politics. I feel like the Trump administration prompted a lot of millennials and Gen Z to talk about politics, and throw around those really intense emotions, but it really hasn't prompted them to get involved just yet. So I really like that you're so active, and I think it's desperately needed. No matter what your political views are, as an educator, I'm always about free
Right.
speech, getting involved, figuring who you are first and foremost. So I absolutely love that. And I have nothing but respect for you. I did
Sure.
want to ask though, what do you think is the biggest misconception about conservatives, especially as a college student? I'm sure you have some opinions
Yeah,
on this.
absolutely. Well, I, I believe in being colorblind, but I have been blessed with being a Latino, and I truly do love my culture. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions, especially when you're talking about university campuses and education in that realm, in that
Yeah.
atmosphere, is that they think we're all old. They think we're all white. They think we're all racist. And it's something that really bothers me to the core. And it couldn't be farther from the truth. I mean, the new Republican Party, the new conservative
Yeah.
movement truly is such a diverse melting pot where, no matter kind of where you go and what, organization you join or start mingling with, you find people from all sorts of backgrounds. I mean, I couldn't tell you how many people I know in conservative nonprofits or in the Republican Party throughout California that are sons of immigrants, or who their grandparents fled communism, or who are first generation Americans and students who have made a name for themselves and have been successful in providing for their family, and that's how they acquired their wealth. All sorts of different stories and backgrounds. I think that's honestly the biggest misconception, is that the Republican Party and the conservative values are still aligned with corporatism, and it's just this single mold white male, sometimes of an older age, and that couldn't be farther from the truth.
Yeah. No, I agree with you entirely. And I'm curious, I mean, because I'm a fellow
Right.
Titan as well, and unfortunately, whenever I ask this question, I'm a little sad to hear that things aren't so great at Cal State Fullerton these days, especially for conservatives.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what really has been like your college experience inside the classroom or with your professors because you have been so outspoken about politics. Like, does that impact your, classroom experience at
Yeah,
all?
well, okay. I have a bit of optimism on this topic because at Cal State Fullerton with
Okay,
Turning
okay,
Point
good.
USA, we've had tremendous success despite obstacles being thrown our way. We've had hundreds of students sign up. We hosted Charlie Kirk just a few months ago, and we packed this place so much that we
Wow.
had to turn people away. I mean, there was over 400 people in one room, just a few blocks away from Cal State Fullerton. And the best part was it was a majority of students and even some staff from Cal State Fullerton that were genuinely excited to hear from a young conservative voice like Charlie Kirk and support our organization by showing up. So, yes, of course, there's been backlash. The Daily Caller even wrote an article about the Progressives Club of Cal State Fullerton threatening violence against me and other chapter members of Turning Point USA. One of their funnier comments, but just to go to show how far they were going in these private messages that we were able to obtain, they were talking about how they hoped that I would go up to their table, because I made it a mission every time they would be out there to go up to their table, ask them questions, and truly argue against their progressive ideology that is so harmful and lacks a very basic understanding of economics and how the world really works. So I always made it a mission to be there and ask them questions in the most respectful manner, and never swore or cussed at them. But they were hoping I would show up and that they would be there in, and I kid you not, in furry suits, so that they could fight me in their furry suits. So not only are they sexually deviant and weird, they hope to fight me while in their sexual deviant suits. And it was truly shocking, and I didn't know if I should be concerned about their mental state or be amused by these outlandish comments. And their president was hoping that another member of their clubs who held a debate with me would fight me. And it was truly concerning, because I don't advocate for violence the same way I don't advocate for war, because I know what violence is like. I served as a military police officer. I've seen violence. I've been involved in moments that included and involved violence, and it's not a pretty thing. But that just goes to show how desperate they are to keep conservatives down. And it just wouldn't go well. So I'm very glad that they never acted upon their more sadistic mindsets and actually tried it, because I just don't think it would be a beautiful thing for our amazing campus. It's just not what we need. It needs to be an environment where people discuss ideas. That's what all universities should be like. But that's the Progressives Club. So it does happen.
Yeah.
We've had students flip us off. We've had students say terrible things that I won't repeat. But at the same time, I've had a student call me ugly, say a couple other terrible things, flip me off, and then maybe half an hour later, she's apologizing and crying in my arms, because we don't act like the left. And people are surprised when it's, a son of immigrants who has a big heart, who wishes them the best, just doesn't agree with their policies. And I genuinely make an admission. The only time you'll ever see me be mean or aggressive is when they start showing a lenience towards violence. When they start leaning towards violence and destruction of property. And at that point, I'm going to defend, my fellow peers and my students and whoever it may be. But most of the time, and thank God, 99% of the time, it's truly just discourse, and they seem to be more angrier than us, but we still treat them with the utmost respect. Now, the Cal State Fullerton administration has threaded the line very carefully, and I will give them props. They do better than most when it comes to respecting conservative values and free speech. And this goes, I think it's a result of a lot of the efforts from previous students in the conservative movement, and our support from local organizations like the Lincoln Club of Orange County and the Lincoln Club Network. And they've brought me to their office a couple days before Christmas, around like a week before Christmas, and informed me in an impromptu way, kind of sabotaging me, that there had been multiple reports against me through the Office of Student Conduct. So I was there with the Director of Student Life and the Vice Dean of Student Conduct to discuss what I was doing wrong. And it was preposterous. And of course, I gave them the most respect in listening to them, but most of it truly was nonsense, which gladly I could ignore, because they were mostly suggestions that were aimed to intimidate and inadvertently, or well, they were planning it, but as a secondary effect, censor our speech and our endeavors as a conservative club on campus. And it was simple things like don't record students on campus. Well, last time I checked, there's the First Amendment and plenty of case law that protects recording in public, especially on a university. And I explained to them we only record students who are flipping us off, trying to throw things at us, acting in a violent way, or we think that they might act out in a violent way. And the only thing he could say was fair enough, because luckily I know the law. I was involved in law enforcement, and I'm a constitutional conservative, so I really do appreciate studying and learning about my case law and what you can and can't do. So they didn't have much there. The other thing was my social media conduct, which last time I checked, I'm a grown man, I'm a veteran, and I'm in America. I will post what I like, especially when I make it an absolute mission to be respectful to the most that I can. And some of it was simply, oh, well, you posted the comments of other people. I said, okay, great. They were public comments. And I still gave them the courtesy of blocking out their name and their username and their faces, because the point was what we're seeing, not attack this person. And they said, well, people, they're receiving hate messages and things of that nature. And I said, well, I'm sorry. I truly hope that these people stop, because that's not what we advocate for from the conservative movement. We're not hateful people. We're actually happy, unlike the left. And I'm not going to stop. They're making public comments. Simple as that. They attack us constantly. I guarantee you they've never been brought into student conduct to tell them to stop insulting us and saying terrible things like I'm not actually Latino, or I'm just another, R-word conservative, or another Trumpian. I mean, they say so many different things out in the public. They never face any repercussions, and it's that double standard for leftists. And then the last thing was false accusations of vandalism. And that's how far they'll go. Where a young lady was saying that Turning Point stickers were ending up on her car. And in the great grandness of their logic, the school assumed somehow I was the one doing it. And of course, former law enforcement background, we don't advocate for vandalism. If one of my students were doing that, I would bring them myself to the student conduct office and tell them, he's doing this, it's wrong, or he or she is doing this, it's wrong. We don't advocate for this. Do it what you will. And I even told them, well, again, I'm really sorry that's happening. We don't do that. We don't advocate for that. And I hope there's a police report so they can find out who did. And they said, yes, there is a police report. I'm like, okay, great. That's not going to terrify me, but that's not us. And quite frankly, I even told them to their faces, how do I know she didn't do it herself? Because the person who was doing these things had attacked me multiple times on social media, and I don't put it beneath the left to try to make up scenarios and situations to stop conservative voices, especially when we're being as successful as we are at Cal State Fullerton. So it's been ups and downs, but truly we're really optimistic and positive about our experience because most professors, at least on my side, other students haven't been so lucky, but for myself, they don't even bother trying to stop me and my views. And that's why I always tell students, when you're really outspoken, they can't touch you. They don't know what to do when a student comes into a classroom and is so outspoken and respectful and logical about their points that they can't just bully them into being quiet. And truthfully, that's the best way forward. I've enjoyed Cal State Fullerton. I've walked into offices where they roll their eyes and they hate that I'm even in their presence. But we're gaining a lot of support from students and staff. I won't name departments, but there's plenty. We have an amazing advisor who's a professor at Cal State Fullerton, who is a true conservative and a warrior, and it's a female professor that we couldn't be more blessed to have. So we're optimistic, regardless of the left attacks.
That's really good. That makes me happy. As you know, I'm a big defender of the Constitution as well, so I'm so happy to hear just how well versed you are on it and that you stood your ground, because I really think we do need more of that, because there is obvious censorship going on in academia, not just for students, but for instructors as well. But this is a huge issue. I mean, if you can't speak freely in an institution of higher education in America, then where can you? It's like there really is a war on our speech right now.
Yeah, there is.
And even the last episode I did, with Professor Rains, I mean, like he was talking about that too. This is something that instructors are facing quite a bit. So I'm curious though, like how do you think we really truly change this, or move forward from the censorship issue, but also this phenomenon happening between students where when they have a disagreement, it's not just, oh, I disagree with you. It's like this contempt and this demonization happening towards the other student. And I'm really like, what are your thoughts about that? How do we really move forward? Have instructors set a good example in your classes on how to deal with that phenomenon when it happens, or what are your thoughts?
I'll go back to a quick point that you made about professors, because it ties into this perfectly. In my time being in higher education as a student, I have met multiple professors who are honestly too afraid to speak out for a genuine concern of losing their jobs. Because students have free speech.
Yeah.
They don't have as much control over them. So the most they can do is bully, try to throw obstacles their way when they try to host events and things of that nature. And some places are a lot worse, absolutely. But that's what I've experienced. However, professors have called me and genuinely shown their concern for showing support or becoming advisors for conservative clubs because they fear losing their jobs, and that's how they put food on the table and keep a roof over their head. I mean, it's a serious risk. I've had professors call me to give me an outpouring of support and say, but I'm sorry, I just simply can't risk myself, or I need to consider this. I'm going to have to pray over this with my family. And that is terrifying, where they have to
Yeah.
go and pray with their family to exercise their First Amendment right and support students with a different
Yeah.
ideology than the leftist mob that run universities. And that just goes to show how much of a monopoly there is on higher education by the left. And it truly makes me sad. And I always tell them, if you can't risk it, don't do it. Because at the end of the day, it can still continue at the public school. We'll set up our tables. Don't lose your job over it. And it's truly concerning. The same goes for students. Some students that have ambitions for going on in higher education, getting their doctorate or PhDs, masters, whatever it may be, they have to be concerned about their grades and their GPA. And when you write a essay on something that is left leaning and you give your perspective as a conservative, many of those professors will flat out ask you to rewrite it. I've heard that happen before from students at Cal State Fullerton. You will be graded down. That happened to me more than once. And it's truly terrifying. However, there is a way forward, and it's repeated over and over again, but truly it is the best way forward, and that is become uncancelable. And in the world of being canceled, that's very difficult to achieve, but really, you just don't have to, if you just don't care, you become uncancelable, right? When you're, like I said earlier, when you're just straight up
I like that.
outspoken and you don't care if they cancel you, canceling isn't a tool they can use against you. It's not a weapon they can use. You're uncancelable at that point. You don't have to censor yourself to be uncancelable. You just have to be really outspoken. And that's truly the way forward. If professors start coming out strong against the monopoly that higher education has, when they band together and they're outspoken, when students go into a room and speak their minds, it's happened to me almost in every single class. You find between 2 to 7 more conservative students who will then slowly, as the weeks go by throughout the semester, become more and more outspoken, and then the professor doesn't know what to do. I've seen the dumbfounded look on their face when one of my professors taught a class called the American Dream. It was an American Studies class. I was ecstatic for it. I believe I'm living the American dream. My parents are immigrants. I love this country. So I was genuinely excited to hear about the American dream from an academic standpoint and study that. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
he was left-leaning. A respectable guy, but definitely left-leaning. So far as he once said that America isn't really that great, and that many countries are the same, if not better. And you can imagine, as a veteran who served his country, who's proud to be an American, I truly was upset by that comment, and quickly became a debate between him and I. I've had to, repeat myself multiple times to write communism or socialism as an option to why people flee different countries when we were going over that topic. And he was like, okay, economic and social issues. No. They flee because there's communism and socialism. And I really had to really repeat myself and not stop until he wrote that on the board. And those are the little things they try to do. But a couple of weeks later, several friends that I had made by being an outspoken conservative came into classroom, and we kind of coordinated, I won't lie, with the hat of a certain former president that seems to trigger many Americans today. And we wore our hats to campus. And if you can't kind of figure out who it is, we wore MAGA hats and Trump 2024 hats to class on the same day. And I will never forget the beautiful look on his face when he was genuinely surprised someone had the guts to do it. And not a comment was made by the professor or any of the students. Why? Because when you're outspoken, you get your people who you realize are also conservative, because honestly, there's more than you think in the classrooms. When you're outspoken, they come to you and they tell you. And when you band together, they genuinely don't know what to do with you, except for just letting you be you. And that's how we move forward, by being outspoken, becoming uncancelable, and banding together. And that's what so many organizations in America do, like Young Americans for Liberty, the Young Americans Foundation, the Turning Point USAs of the world. That's what all it does, is bring people together. And again, if you're not even part of an organization, start one, or just get your people together. Those are your friends who share those values. Trust me, those are the people you want around you anyways. You don't want the leftist who thinks there's a million genders and will insult you if you're not praising AOC in your sleep. You want the people who have those family values, that share the values that you believe in. Even if you're just a moderate, find your moderate friends, find your conservative friends, whatever it may be. And of course, we don't lose friends over politics. I truly advocate for that. I have friends voted for Biden. Many of them regret it already and are starting to listen to what I'm saying. But there's a love and respect for each other.
Yeah.
And I don't ever would disrespect them for their decision. I just send them pictures of the gas price every time I drive past it. So there's a lot of things you can do to become uncancelable. And I mean, again, I sound like a broken record, but truly, when you're outspoken, you find more people that believe the same things you believe, and they don't know what to do. And that's what America is about. That's why you have a First Amendment right. So if you're not going to flex those rights, just like muscles, you're going to lose them. So you flex those First Amendment muscles, and that's how you keep them.
I love that so much. And as you know, I'm working to get the Academic Freedom
Right.
Network off the ground, which is an organization for, professors who have been censored. And it's not strictly for conservative professors. No. It's for all professors. It's just if you have been censored, absolutely. That's who we want to give a home. And I absolutely love what you said. If you're okay with it, I would love to share that clip with our members, maybe even post it on our Instagram, because I just think it's such a good piece of advice. And I mean, at the meetings that we've had with, I can't post them, to protect the professors who are part of the organization, but with the meetings we've had, it's just, it's insane, how much I think people forget that professors are real people, and it's hard to hear their stories about, like you were mentioning earlier about when a professor really has to go home and pray with their family. Right. Is this something that I can be outspoken about? That is not supposed to happen. It's not.
Yeah, no, you can absolutely share with them, and I would love to speak with them at any time you guys want, because professors have a big deal in this. They truly change the culture. I mean, professors, just like teachers, are a blessing to this country and to many young minds. And when they feel free to discuss different ideas, even if they don't necessarily agree with them, when they foster an environment where those ideas can come to fruition, those debates can happen, that only makes our society better. I don't want a society that only agrees with what I'm saying. I want a society that will respect different ideas and debate and find the best way forward, even if that's a compromise. Of course, I hope it's a conservative compromise and it leans our way, because truly they work a lot more than the left's ideas. But that's what makes America great. It's that different of ideas and the ability to articulate your ideas and debate them and have philosophical and academic discussions on these things. And without professors, we have nothing on the university campus. We don't stand a chance. And they are just as much on the battleground as students are who are fighting the culture war against the left.
I can back that statement up. They are, but I hope the students who, are going through a tough time or don't feel like they can speak up, I hope they know that there are professors out there who still, think like they do, or who would defend them. They are there. It's just hard to find. But I love your perspective, and I agree with it 100%, because I really think that a lot, we need that diversity of thought, and we need those environments where students can speak freely, because in all honesty, half of the problems that our generation is going to face, we don't have a textbook for. So we have to have that ingenuity, and that starts in the classroom. The instructor needs to give their students a place to talk, and in a sense, a safe space to fail, right, if you will, or make mistakes, work through ideas, and hear different ideas.
You need to have a free speech zone everywhere, instead of the little corners that some universities falsely make students believe they have to follow.
Exactly. I like that. So because you are so involved in politics and in education as well, I'm curious from your perspective, and if it's different from mine, what do you think are the top 3 issues in education right now?
Well, there's a difference between the K-12 education and obviously higher education. I have been drawn to the fight for better outcomes for K-12 students in government schools. The reason I call them government schools opposed to public schools is because they're controlling their students, and they truly have become government schools. The OC Register talked about this not too long ago, that the California K-12 system is in a state of emergency. And that's how serious they are about it. It's not just local news. The nation knows our education system is failing. The government schools are failing. And in California, we have the unique problem of having leftist policies running the show. Obviously, the Democrats have a monopoly over just about everything in California, and that includes the education system. So, I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but the California school budget for K through 12 and community colleges is $128 billion. And it is a shocking number when you consider 95.5 billion of that goes to K through 12. Yet our students are underperforming and can't do English or math at the standard. And it truly is very disheartening. I went through a public school. Not all of them are great, but I had the blessing of having great educators and a great education that allowed me to become who I am. I mean, truly, the educators in my life helped me out a lot, and that's a story for a whole different time. But it's sad. We had 49.7 billion in 2010 to 2011. Now we're sitting at 110.4 billion, and students are doing worse. And there's been a gradual increase in California's education when it comes to standardized testing for a couple of years now. And then it took a big dive and has been progressively getting worse from there. Part of it is because of the Democrats' big advocacy for distance learning, which we know K through 12, it just doesn't work. I mean, kids aren't going to learn off a computer when they're, in the third grade. It truly does not work. So it's really disheartening. The first thing is the unions have a strong grip on California education where we can't fire teachers who are not teaching the standard, who are not doing their jobs correctly. We need to give the jobs to good teachers who genuinely care about the students and their educational outcomes and reward them, instead of just keeping teachers and giving the union so much power over our education system, because all they do is spend their union dues on getting more Democrats elected, and then they go in and make sure that those Democrats that they're supporting with money and endorsements are going to increase the budget so they get more money and the teachers get more money, and that's it. There's no kids or parents in that equation. So we need to transform education to give parents a voice and loosen the grip on the Democrat monopoly and the union monopoly over the education system. And then in higher education, the biggest threat is that censorship and the cancel culture. I don't know how it happens. I've heard the theory that it goes as back as the Vietnam War and how leftists started slowly gaining control of higher education. But again, it's easy to break. Yeah, it's been slowly happening, and the generation that came before us, unfortunately, didn't identify it early enough, and they didn't fight against it early enough. So now we have that burden, and I hope that our generation knows the fight so well and is really fighting that our kids don't have to have that problem, and the future generations don't. But it's a long fight. They have such a monopoly that, students find themselves having to be left-leaning just to get by or hide their views. And truthfully, the biggest problem is that they brainwash these kids from such an early age now. I mean, it starts as little as kindergarten when they're learning about gender identity, and they're teaching them about socialism, and they're advocating for these things like, this is the norm, this is what's right, kids, and those young kids are extremely moldable at those ages. And you go and you're learning all these things, and you get to higher education, they really pound it on you, where you have to write essays about so many things that are left-leaning that it almost makes sense to why they come out being power leftists. And then these people are the ones who are going to go run institutions, become professors, become doctors, go and become elected officials and lawyers. And it's really concerning. So it all comes back to leftist monopoly on education. We need to get rid of the unions in education and give the voices and the responsibilities back to the parents, because they want it. They're just being restricted by the government schools. And we need to fight that censorship and the cancel culture, because without that, it's not going to change, and it will only get worse. I mean, for example, at my university, Cal State Fullerton, they have a Latinx resource center. And I can tell you right now, Latinos don't use Latinx. It's a very small percentage that even know what the heck that means, because it was created by a bunch of leftists, writing little essays trying to out-woke each other. It's just not used. It's not a real term. It's actually quite offensive, because my language doesn't need gender fluid, different immigration. It's a giant mess. I've heard so many theories on what it actually means. I don't even think they know what it means. And they're not in touch with society. because of those monopolies. They go up through higher education and they get a job in higher education, and then they start pushing more of these leftist ideas in higher education, and they stay in their little bubble, out of touch and out of reality with what the rest of the country and the world is really like. So we have to break that monopoly. We really do.
Absolutely. And to expand on that as well, I can testify to the fact that I've been in this education system for a long time, as a student for a
Sure.
long time, and then now as an educator. Our education system, simply put, is not about actual
That's right.
education. It's not about, and that breaks my heart, because as a teacher, I wish
Right.
it was. I wish we had better outcomes. But in all honesty, for students, parents listening, our schools right now, whether it's K through 12 or higher education, they are focused on
Absolutely.
indoctrination. I will not BS you. That's exactly what it is. We are not, our education system is not focused on creating scholars. It's focused on creating
Exactly.
compliant citizens who do not rattle the cage. If it was really about scholarship, then we wouldn't have such an issue about
Right.
censorship. It's like, it's not about that. So I agree with
Yeah.
everything
I mean,
you
their
said.
their indoctrination is
100.
so bad that they believe their own nonsense to the point where they are ending honor programs in many public schools because somehow they're racist, because somehow math is a white person thing, and minority children, like I was once, can't do math, and we can't excel in math. So let's get rid of the math honor program. And I mean, truthfully, I always say it, and I don't ever regret it. Liberals and leftists are truly the racist in America, outside of the neo Nazis, which no one supports, not even the conservative movement. They hold these ideas so deep in their head that they think they're doing good. But you look at the cancellation, for example, of the honors programs, they genuinely think that African American and Latino and other minority students are failing at math because they can't do it and because only white kids can. So they get rid of the honors program instead of self-analyzing their teaching methods and what they're doing to get those students up to standard and above standard, instead of canceling the honor programs. I mean, they're delusional. And it's truly very disheartening on what the left thinks of minorities in education. And unfortunately, the people who suffered the most are lower income communities, which are minority majority. They truly are a minority community most of the time, statistically, and they do the worst. And when you bring up things like school choice, where a single African American mom can send her kids to a better school just a few miles away, so they have a better outcome in life, because education has such an impact on your outcome in life. They can't, because they're stuck to a government school that has unions that won't ever allow it to happen because they lose power and money. While at the same time, they turn around and advocate that they care about minorities, right? And that's why I support Lance Christensen so much. He's running for superintendent of the California public education system, and he's an advocate for school choice, which is almost unheard of. But that's because that's what truly has results on communities that are suffering the most from this lack of educational standards. I mean, truly, the kids aren't even reading where they should be. They're not doing math where they should be. And instead of options like giving parents a right to what they teach them when it comes to the leftist ideologies and social issues, they're focusing on canceling honors programs because they think black and brown kids can't do math and English. Only the whites can, so they end the programs. They don't want kids to be able to go to school down the road, because then the unions lose their support, their dues, their money. And it's just truly disheartening. I mean, again, I really have to hound on it again that unions are a giant problem in education. They truly are. They're not what they used to be. They are terrible, and they cause a lot of harm to the education system.
Yeah, I mean, and the history of unions, like, there is a very
Absolutely.
beautiful side to the history of unions. They can be really good, but unfortunately, you are right in regards to what's going on with teachers' unions, because they're not even actually helping
Not
the
at all.
teachers. We don't really get the help we need. And like you were saying, all they're really doing, it's going
Yeah.
to politics, like to different politicians, different
Yeah.
campaigns, programs. It's not going to the teachers. And then especially during the pandemic, the good teachers who were still holding on, sometimes you just can't make ends meet, and you can't
Yeah.
do it anymore because those teachers don't have the resources. But and to expand a little bit off of what you were saying just a moment ago, I also think there's a huge problem. I see it all the time with my fellow educators, whether it's higher ed or K through 12. There are a lot of teachers who unfortunately forget that it's about the students. It's not about you. That's why we got into education. So you need to remain adaptable for your students, and you can't be doing the same lessons for 10 years, or the
Yeah.
same lectures for 10,
Right.
20 years. Like, you got to switch it up. You got to stay with the times, be adaptable, and it's about your students. You have to make sure that they are leaving a subject matter expert, and you do what you got to do to help them get to the finish line. And if you can't do that, then get out of
Yeah.
education. Like, you got to have grit if you're going to be in
Yeah.
education now, or get out of
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
way for someone
Who will
who's
care? Right.
ready for the
Because
fight.
when it's done right, unions are a
Yeah.
blessing and they're very beneficial. And historically, they served a tremendous purpose in this country. And teachers are a blessing to this nation, whether it be in the pre-K teacher or K through 12 or higher education. They're truly a blessing to this country, and they're a foundation for our future. I mean, the young are the future of our country, but it's just not being done right, and there needs to be change. It's a very big issue, and it's why I'm so drawn to it, because I went through the public education system, and as a son of immigrants, the importance of education was pounded into me, and I'm so glad it was, because it truly is a foundation for your whole life.
Yeah. And there actually was one other issue that I wanted
Absolutely.
to mention and kind of get your comments on, because I've had a recent uptick in mama bears really following the
Okay, awesome.
podcast, and
We
reaching
love
out
mama
on
bears.
Instagram. I absolutely, yeah, I love it. I love those messages. I love when I get to talk to the moms, and
Yeah.
it's amazing. So I really want to use this opportunity to kind of, well, let all parents know that, in my opinion, one of the number one issues throughout all levels of education that is just permeating, throughout our education system is this attempt to normalize pedophilia. It's not a joke. It's not something you're just seeing on the news. It's real. So for the parents who kind of, are suspicious about things, or suspicious about the curriculum, follow your gut on that one. I'm telling you, as an educator, for the parents out there, get involved, especially if it's, if they're young, if it's the elementary level, but even for your college students, stay involved, help them. This really is a thing. And for the educators who are scared to talk out against this, it's kind of do or die
Right.
time. The writing's on the wall. Like, if educators know what's going on, you need to start speaking up. Otherwise, this historian is taking notes.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be pretty ticked if you do not,
Right.
tell people, like, hey, it's an issue. And I'm like, no, I draw
Yeah.
the line.
No, it's a huge issue. I mean, I think they're trying to rename it. They're basically rebranding it so it sounds like one
What?
of their other gender ideologies. I think they call it minor attractive syndrome or something like that. I mean, you're a pedophile, period. But
Matt.
they rebranded it like straight out of a page of a PR book to try to make it more inclusive and what the left is already trying to push with gender ideologies and gender theory. And it's a huge concern. Parents, they have to get involved. That's why we always fight for parental rights in education. The school boards need to listen to parents. Parents need to go out there in massive waves and show out to school board meetings. They need to run for school board. They need to get involved. They need to help candidates they know will make a difference and reflect their values for education. And they simply cannot trust government schools to have the best for their kids in mind. They simply cannot trust government schools and school boards. It's worse in some places than others. LA County will straight up ignore your wishes. They will lock down your kids and send them to Zoom classes despite the very clear signs that it's lowering their educational outcomes and abilities. And at the same time, invite drag individuals to do drag shows and try to teach them these other ideas instead of simply doing math and English where they're already lacking. But truly, they have to get involved. And that's why I don't commonly support candidates openly and endorse them day in and day out. But Lance Christensen in the educational front is the best chance California has. I mean, again, he's running for superintendent of public education here in California. and he advocates for school choice. He's all about parental rights in education, and that's a statewide issue. Get out, support, vote, whatever you can. But at the local level, get involved. Know your kids' teachers. Find out what they're doing. Look over what they have to read in class. Look over what their homework says, because they're putting wokeism even into math questions. And go to your school board and make sure that they know your name and face, and that they know you're going to come out any single time that they push things that are not good for your students. And be courageous, just like students in higher education, just like professors. And be courageous. Yes, Joe Biden has threatened to put you on an FBI watch list simply for speaking out. Well, guess what? There's due process. So what? Stand up for your kids, because that is the most important thing. And Byron can't remember what he's supposed to say, let alone come after parents. So far they haven't been able to do much. You have to be courageous. You have to fight for your kids, because not only are they your most precious gift from God, they are the future of our country. And without parents involved, there's even less hope.
Yeah. And I do want to say too that I once heard a piece of advice from Dennis Prager. I was lucky enough to have an opportunity to go hear him speak, and he was kind of talking about like the issues regarding censorship in higher education. But I'll never forget this piece of advice. He said, along the lines of like, not everyone has that fighting disposition or has the opportunity to really get involved in the fight, and that's understandable. But if you can't, and the people who are in the fight, support them relentlessly, reach out to them, ask how you can help. And for like those instructors where you can't afford to lose your job, I totally get it. But help the students, help the instructors who are talking about it. If you can't really get involved in the fight, it's understandable, but help the fighters.
I mean, and I'm a military man. When we went out and did, training for missions, there's a support network. Not everyone is shooting the guns and riding in the tanks, etc., or flying the planes. There are people behind the scenes, and that's exactly how the movement should be here in California. We need to have people who are supporting. If you have the means, donate to the people you know are going to make a difference. If you have the means, help them make cute ads and graphics for their social media. If you can, share it to all your friends, text it to them, talk to them about these things, regardless of what your issue is. And especially when it comes to kids, simply talking about it is a tremendous help to changing our society. Tell it to your neighbors, tell it to your parents, tell it to your, aunts and uncles. Even if, maybe you have a leftist cousin, hey, still try it. You never know. Talk truth in love and scream it from the rooftops. If you can't teach your dog to do it on repeat, whatever you can do to spread the message. Not everyone has to be at the forefront, doing podcasts or running for office or whatever it may be. But there's still something you can do, and that whatever you can do, you need to start doing it today. Because honestly, you should have started like years ago. But start today, and that will be a tremendous help.
It really will, definitely. And I know you are incredibly busy, so I want to thank you for, taking time to speak with me. And I would love to conclude with a question about California, if you will. And I keep on brand with the podcast. What do you think are the beauty and blemishes of living in California?
We'll start on the blemishes so we can end on a good beauty note, right?
Okay.
So look, California is truly great. I do love California, but we have our blemishes, right? California right now, the biggest problems are our education system, which I won't go on repeat about that. We've gone extensively through it. It is a huge issue. And the other thing is crime. Crime is going up so very much. And as someone with a background in law enforcement, it makes me sad at how these officers who risk their lives every day on the streets are having their hands tied by progressive district attorneys. I mean, Orange County just beat a Soros-backed progressive running for district attorney. LA, unfortunately, is still stuck with them. Luckily, their recall is moving forward. God bless. But they're still stuck with them, and they're releasing criminals. And in LA, those results are very clear. I mean, murders are up 35% in the last couple of years, and it's the highest in 15 years in just the first half of 2022. Smash and grabs are going up. home invasions are going up, property crime is going up. And although violent crime is going down slightly, murders are going up with gun violence, even though we have the strictest gun control. Just saying gun control doesn't work. I'll just throw that in there. But it just, there's so many things like that. We have a homeless issue because the Democrat Party is just throwing money at the problem instead of finding solutions like funding for mental health counseling and truly finding ways to get these people back on their feet, and giving addicts treatment and hope. You can't save everyone, but what we're doing in California isn't working. And it has its blemishes. But I will say this. I genuinely do not like when people who are not from California try to talk smack on California. Because what they don't realize, and this goes into the beauty part, that California has some of the most amazing, energetic, patriotic Americans fighting for conservative values and fighting against the left like nowhere else. I mean, Californians will go into the deepest blue parts of their state, of their county, of their city, and show up in hundreds. They'll go to school board meetings in record crowds like we've never seen before in the last, ever since I've been born, I've never seen so many parents showing up to school board meetings and city council meetings and board of director meetings for the county and county supervisor meetings. There are so many patriotic Americans in California that are fighting like nowhere else. So people who are out of California need to stay in their lane and support us rather than disparage California for being a leftist hellhole with no hope, because they don't understand the fight. And that's part of the beauty. California, we have an uphill battle against some of the worst Democrats, progressives, and leftists. And as someone who genuinely does enjoy that fight, it is a beautiful thing seeing my fellow Americans come out with such tremendous energy and vigor for change. And we have it is changing a lot. The other thing is California is just a giant melting pot of diversity. You can get food from anywhere in the world here. You can do a bunch of different things. You literally, I don't think you could run out of things to do within the state of California. And that diversity is truly America's strength, but it's also California's strength. And to bring it back to politics, that diversity is changing the political landscape. We have so many different worldviews here, and many people, like Latinos, are going to assist the red wave coming forward. And slowly, inch by inch, mile by mile, we're going to flip California and make it purple and eventually red. Because the left's strength is that they have a lot of Democrats in office right now, and they have a monopoly. But their weakness is all their policies are garbage, and a 10-year-old could do better. So we have hope. We could do more. We can do better, and California fights like nowhere else, and that's why I love it.
I absolutely love that. And also one other, sure. I forgot to throw this in earlier. But another little piece of advice to kind of expand off of what you said, for those this is more so in regards to higher education. If you are experiencing censorship of any kind, here's my number one tip. That the radical, like the far left, their Achilles heel is that they rely on catchphrases. If you can spot the catchphrases, and if you constantly back up what you're saying with evidence, you will win every single debate, and they will not be able to touch you. Like, look out.
Yeah, they repeat their speech because they lack the logic to argue on their own. So once you figure out what they're saying and you educate yourself, it's very easy to beat them at their own game. And the other thing is, not only do they have those key phrases, they repeat their words. For example, if you say as a Latino, I say, I want strong border security with immigration reform so we get the right people in, the right way, but stop the bad people from coming in. They'll call me a racist. And I'll quickly tell them, no, you're a bigot for assuming I'm a racist just because I have different ideas. Flip it on their script, flip their script, use their words against them, and realize that they will call you whatever they can to disparage and, invalidate your arguments. And again, if you don't care what they say, you're uncancelable, because God knows I am not racist. God knows the Republican Party in California and in this country is not racist. Conservatives are not racist. And I will punch a neo-Nazi just like anyone else would. That's just not who we are. And when you learn their catchphrases, you learn what they use against you, it's very easy to counter. Just like running the state, a 10-year-old could do better. A 10-year-old could beat a leftist with the right ideas. I
love that. And that is an epic way to end the interview. That was awesome. Well, thank you so much, Marcos, for speaking with me. This really was amazing. I have so much respect for you. I always learn so much whenever I talk to you. And thank you so much. Keep up the amazing work. And you are always, always
Well,
welcome
thank you,
back on the
Professor
show
Long. I
anytime.
truly appreciate it, and I can't wait to see what's in store for your podcast and the academic network that you're building. And